In this video, I'm going to address a few practices that we know destroy interpersonal relationships, or that we know are not very helpful in maintaining or building the kind of relationship you want to build. A lot of this grows out of research into marital communication and what kinds of communication practices destroy marriages, but I think it applies to all long-term relationships. We have now behind us 30 to 50 years of research into long-term relationships and what's necessary for them and what harms them. So first, there is a kind of law that says that all conversations, or something like 95% of conversations, end the same way they begin. And what this means for interpersonal relationships is that if you begin a conversation in a negative tone, or with a harsh tone, or with a tone of contempt, the conversation will end harshly, or with contempt, or in a negative fashion. If you begin a conversation, even if it's a conflict, with a positive tone, then odds are, even if you get into an argument during the course of that conversation, it will end in a positive tone. So the first communication pitfall to look out for is you should notice the tone and general manner with which you begin conversations with your partner. Always strive to begin a conversation with a positive tone. Someone good at interpersonal communication begins interpersonal communication with a positive tone because they know that the conversation will end on a positive tone also if they begin that way. Second, we also know that criticism destroys interpersonal relationships. Criticism attacks the character of the person. It's not the same thing as complaining. We often complain about our partners. For example, I might feel disappointed that my partner didn't pick up dishwashing detergent from the grocery store, which I had asked about earlier. Criticism takes that complaint and turns it into attack on someone's character. So if I tell my partner that their failure to pick up the dishwashing detergent is really about their laziness or selfishness, then you've turned a complaint into a criticism. So you can complain to your partner, but do not turn complaints into criticism. The reason that criticism is so bad is that it communicates disgust or contempt. Contempt or disgust is a way of showing a person, even if you do it in a joking manner, that your relationship to them is not even worth almost nothing. So sometimes criticism or disgust or contempt can be communicated with jokes, and you can say, well, I was just saying something to be funny. But if you're still producing or showing the other person that you have disgust or contempt for them, that will destroy interpersonal relationships. So someone good at interpersonal communication will learn to avoid the criticism and contempt practices. The reason those practices are so bad is that they almost always, and then again it's like 95%, they put the other person on the defensive. So the communicative cycle becomes criticism, contempt, defensiveness. Criticism, contempt, defensiveness. And if that's the cycle, you have a sure sign that the interpersonal relationship will kind of unravel. Third, we also know that stonewalling, what's called stonewalling, destroys interpersonal communication or interpersonal relationships. Stonewalling occurs when one partner tunes the other partner out or attempts to remove themselves from the conversation or communication or discussion. It's a form of withholding. But remember I said earlier that one cannot not communicate, so stonewalling also communicates contempt and disregard for your partner. Don't stonewall or withdraw, or if your partner is stonewalling or withdrawing, try to avoid becoming more angry or more upset. Fourth, we also know that flooding and the forms of nonverbal communication that go along with flooding signal distressed interpersonal relationships. Flooding happens when one partner is suddenly or unexpectedly overwhelmed by strong emotions. Physiological changes coincide with flooding, so an increased heart rate, increased blood pressure, those sorts of things that you can imagine. The presence of those nonverbal signs and physiological affective states make it impossible to engage in constructive communication practices. So you should recognize the nonverbal signs of flooding and avoid attempting important interpersonal communication in these circumstances. The last thing, the last sort of pitfall of communication practices are what are called failed repair attempts. So inevitably in any interpersonal relationship, two people get into an argument of some sort or there's a disagreement. Good relationships have repair attempts built in. So one partner knows when to tell a joke or when to touch another partner's back or when to do something other than engage in conflict. Those are called repair attempts. So what happens is that those repair attempts are able to de-escalate conflict constantly. Once those repair attempts stop working, then the couple no longer has any communicative means to de-escalate. So you should search for and develop repair methods and be aware when those methods have stopped working, or else it's a sign that the interpersonal relationship is doomed or irreparable potentially. So those are the main communication pitfalls, the main things we look out for if our relationship is being kind of undone or harmed.